In a quiet corner of Greater Manchester, a woman stepped out of her temporary home and vanished. There were no headlines, no sirens, no urgent search parties, just silence. Her name was Rania Alayed, a mother of 3, a Syrian refugee, and a woman who had finally dared to break free from years of abuse and control. After escaping a coercive marriage, she was rebuilding her life. She enrolled in college, learned English, fought for custody, and for the first time in a decade, she was free. But on a summer evening in June 2013, she walked into a flat in Salford to drop off her children. She was never seen again. Her husband would later be caught on CCTV wearing her clothes, impersonating her in a sick attempt to fool the world. Her body? Hidden. Her voice? Silenced. Her digital presence? Hijacked by the very man she had escaped. It would take nearly 12 years, a prison confrontation, and her son's determination to finally uncover the truth. This isn't just the story of a missing woman. It's the story of how justice can be delayed, denied, and rediscovered. This is the story of Rania Alayed. Welcome to the Crime Series. Before we begin, do us a quick favor. Drop your location and the time you're watching this in the comments. We want to know where you're tuning in from, because these stories matter everywhere. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a case. Rania was born in 1985 in Syria, a land rich with history and tradition, yet often marked by deep-rooted patriarchy and conservative family structures. She came into the world during a time when the expectations for women were clearly outlined from birth. Her earliest memories were not of play or exploration, but of preparation, for marriage, for modesty, for duty. In her home, like many others in rural Syrian communities, a girl's worth was closely linked to her obedience, chastity, and ability to serve her family. The social fabric was tightly woven with rules, many of which centered around protecting family honor. A concept so sacred that even the suggestion of independence could spark shame or conflict. From the time she could walk and talk, Rania was groomed for a life that had already been decided for her. The elders taught her to bow her head in humility, to speak softly, and to suppress her own desires in favor of what her family or future husband might require. In school, if she was able to attend, questions were to be kept to a minimum, especially for girls. Education for daughters was sometimes seen as optional, or even unnecessary, especially if they were destined to marry young. And in Rania's case, that future was indeed set in motion far too early. Yet behind this veil of expectation lived a girl with a quiet fire. Those who truly knew Rania, whether a cousin, a neighbor, or a childhood friend, often described her as thoughtful and deeply reflective. She wasn't outspoken, but her silence held weight. She had a mind that observed carefully, and though she rarely challenged authority aloud, she often questioned the world within her own heart. She wondered about the cities beyond the refugee camp she called home. She wondered if a woman could have both family and freedom. She wondered if love could ever feel like liberation, not confinement. These were the kinds of thoughts that made her different, but they were also the thoughts she had to keep hidden. For a girl in her position, even curiosity could be mistaken for defiance. By her mid-teens, her path narrowed further. Living in a refugee camp, where displacement, poverty, and instability added another layer of pressure, Rania met Ahmed al-Khatib, a man nearly a decade her senior. Ahmed was a blacksmith by trade, and in a world short on options, a working man with skills was seen as a reliable match. Their union was arranged swiftly. There was no courtship, no conversation about dreams or compatibility. It was an agreement, shaped more by custom and necessity than emotion. The marriage, though performed with Islamic rites, was not legally recognized under British civil law, a distinction that would later have devastating implications for Rania's ability to seek protection. To the outside world, this marriage may have appeared conventional, but to Rania, it signaled the closing of a door she hadn't even known she could try to open. Ahmed al-Khatib, from all accounts, was a man deeply embedded in patriarchal beliefs that prioritized male authority and female subservience. He was not simply traditional in his expectations. He was possessive, domineering, and unwavering in his conviction that a woman's place was within the walls of the home, beneath the control of her husband. These weren't just private thoughts. They shaped every aspect of his relationship with Rania. From the very beginning of their marriage, Ahmed made his expectations brutally clear. Rania was to be obedient without question, loyal without boundary, and invisible to the outside world. She was not to engage in public life, not to voice dissent, and certainly not to make decisions without his approval. To outsiders, this dynamic was largely hidden. But behind closed doors, Ahmed enforced his ideals through emotional manipulation, psychological intimidation, and over time, physical dominance. Friends, distant relatives, and community members would later testify that Ahmed had always wanted a wife who was silent in public and servile in private. Someone who would cook, clean, care for the children, and ask no questions. He viewed autonomy as disobedience, and viewed Rania's quiet strength not as a virtue, but as a threat. Shortly after their marriage, the couple made the decision to relocate to the United Kingdom. It was 2005, and many in their position might have seen the move as a chance for reinvention, a new beginning in a country known for its democratic freedoms, legal protections, and progressive attitudes toward women. But for Rania, this physical relocation did not come with a change in reality. They settled in Greater Manchester, a region where immigrant communities often live closely together, maintaining cultural ties while adapting to British life. But in the confines of their modest flat, the oppressive rules of their old world followed them. Ahmed brought more than just furniture and family photographs to the UK. He brought his deep-rooted control, his distrust of outsiders, and his determination to keep Rania isolated. He resisted assimilation, discouraged Rania from learning English, and forbade her from forming friendships outside their immediate circle. Even simple acts like walking to the corner shop or speaking to a neighbor were tightly monitored or outright denied. His grip on her life tightened as the years passed, reinforced by the belief that he was upholding family honor. In public, Ahmed kept a low profile. To the casual observer, he was a husband and father trying to build a life in a new country. But those who knew the couple closely, though few ever saw them together, understood that Rania's life was not her own. She was cut off from meaningful interaction with the world beyond her doorstep, her daily existence reduced to servitude and silence. Ahmed's control was not loud or violent in the open. It was steady, calculated, and relentless, a quiet suffocation that wore down Rania's spirit year by year. What made it even more insidious was the cultural silence surrounding it. In tightly knit communities, especially those balancing traditional values with modern environments, abuse can be difficult to name, let alone report. Rania was expected to endure, to stay, to be patient, to be a good wife, even if it meant sacrificing herself in the process. And for a time, she did. In the UK, Rania gave birth to 3 children over the span of several years. Becoming a mother deepened her sense of purpose, but also intensified the isolation she experienced. Her world revolved around her children. They became her joy, her comfort, and later, her reason for resistance. But even in motherhood, Ahmed's control remained unyielding. He dictated when and how she could leave the house. He discouraged friendships and forbade her from working or studying outside the home. She lived under constant surveillance, emotionally, psychologically, and often physically. Ahmed didn't need cameras. His presence was enough. He checked her phone messages, interrogated her about her movements, and accused her of dishonoring him if she dared to challenge his authority. Neighbors described the family as private, often saying they rarely saw Rania on her own. Behind the veil she wore and the modest smile she sometimes gave in passing, very few knew the struggle she endured. Inside their flat, she was not free. As the years passed, Rania slowly began to see a life beyond the walls of her marriage. Still, the cost of leaving a marriage in tightly knit immigrant communities can be devastating. In such environments, women who assert their autonomy are often shunned, vilified, or worse. Rania knew that leaving Ahmed would not only provoke his anger, It would also bring shame upon her in the eyes of her community. But despite the risks, her resolve deepened. By 2012, after nearly a decade of enduring a marriage built on control, fear, and isolation, Rania Alaid made a choice that would redefine the rest of her life. She fled, taking her 3 young children with her. Then, just ages 9, 5, and 3, she left behind the oppressive household in which she had been emotionally and physically confined. It was not just a bold act, it was a dangerous one. For women like Rania, who come from tightly knit, patriarchal communities, leaving a marriage is often seen as a betrayal, not only to a husband, but to an entire extended family and culture. But she did it anyway. That single step from captivity to freedom marked the beginning of a slow, fragile attempt to reclaim her autonomy. Rania found initial refuge in a women's shelter, a hidden, guarded location that protected vulnerable women and children escaping abusive homes. Inside, she was finally free to breathe without being monitored. She could speak without being interrupted. She could think, plan, and begin to imagine a life beyond fear. But survival was only the first goal. Rania wanted more than escape. She wanted to rebuild. She sought legal counsel to begin custody proceedings for her children. She filed reports outlining the abuse she had endured. She took steps to establish herself not just as a survivor, but as an independent woman and a mother, determined to provide her children with a different future. One of her most transformative steps came when she enrolled in English classes at Openshaw College in Manchester. Language had always been a barrier, a tool used by Ahmed to isolate her even further from the society around her. But at Openshaw, Rania began to find her voice again. Learning English wasn't just about grammar and vocabulary. It was about connection, confidence, control. She started making friends, something she had been prohibited from doing for years. In conversations and classrooms, she discovered not only knowledge, but solidarity. Other women admired her strength, her quiet resolve, and her fierce love for her children. Friends she made during that period would later describe her as a woman of striking humility and intelligence. She wasn't loud, nor did she demand attention, but her presence was firm, her eyes reflective, and her intentions unmistakable. She was dedicated to her children in a way that made everything else secondary. Her dream wasn't to live extravagantly, it was simply to live in peace. She wanted her children to grow up free from fear, to study, to laugh, to build friendships, and to believe in themselves. She wanted her daughters especially to know that submission wasn't the only path, that strength could be soft and freedom could be found, even if it had to be fought for. Yet, despite all her efforts to start anew, Rania remained tethered to the very man she had escaped. Ahmed al-Khatib, her estranged husband, still held legal and emotional leverage over her. They shared not just memories and a marriage certificate, but children. And through those children, he retained a shadowy presence in her life. Every co-parenting discussion, every custody negotiation, every exchange of the children kept a window open between them. But while Rania approached these moments with caution and responsibility, Ahmed's motivations were far more sinister. Her newfound independence, her decision to live outside his control, was something he could not tolerate. In his worldview, her departure was not just a loss, it was an insult, a humiliation. And humiliation, in certain circles, must be avenged. Unbeknownst to Rania, as she tried to balance her new life, managing school, childcare, legal battles, and healing, Ahmed was watching, he was listening, and he was planning. Every step she took toward freedom felt, to him, like another attack on his authority. Then came June 2013. On the 7th of that month, Rania received a seemingly routine request. Ahmed asked if she could bring the children to his brother Mohammed's flat in Salford. The stated purpose was familiar, to hand over the children for a weekend visit. On the surface, it seemed like a reasonable arrangement, especially since Ahmed and Rania had managed similar handoffs in the past without incident. And given that custody proceedings were still ongoing, Rania likely wanted to show she was cooperating in good faith. She had every reason to believe this was part of a court-compliant exchange. Mohaned's flat, located at Arthur Millwood Court in Islington, Salford, had been used by the family before. It did not immediately raise suspicion. Rania, ever mindful of her children's right to maintain a relationship with their father, agreed to the meeting. She gathered her children, perhaps packing a small bag with their clothes, and made her way to the flat. She could not have known she was walking into a trap. Behind the walls of that flat, a plan was already in motion. Mohaned, acting under the direction of his brother Ahmed, had cleared the home in advance. His own partner and children had been sent away, ensuring that the space was quiet, private, and controlled. It was no spontaneous decision. It was premeditated. From the moment Rania stepped inside, her fate had already been sealed. If you've made it this far into Rania's story, it means you care about the truth, about justice for those whose voices were silenced. These aren't just stories. They're real lives, real pain, and real failures of protection. Please consider liking this video to help more people discover Rania's case. Subscribe for more in-depth true crime documentaries that give voice to the unheard. And don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss a new release. Rania entered the flat in Salford around early evening on the 7th of June 2013. It was a moment that seemed, on the surface, like any other parenting exchange, routine, even unremarkable. But beneath the surface, an insidious plan had already been set in motion. Approximately 45 minutes after Rania arrived, Mohaned was seen leaving the premises, but not alone. He exited the property with Rania's 3 young children in tow. Strikingly, Rania was not with them. For those watching from outside, the absence may not have immediately raised alarms. After all, it wasn't unusual for a father or uncle to take children for a visit. But behind the flat's closed door, something irreversible had already occurred. Shortly after Mohaned's departure, Ahmed al-Khatib left the flat as well, but not in any ordinary fashion. Surveillance footage and later court testimony would reveal a chilling deception. Ahmed was dressed in Rania's clothing, including a long headscarf, mimicking her appearance in a calculated effort to deceive. His intention was clear and sinister: to create the illusion that Rania had walked out of the flat alive. It was a desperate but deliberate attempt to manipulate any potential witnesses, CCTV, or neighbors, who might later report seeing someone they believed to be Rania leaving the flat of her own accord. What followed was the second phase of a gruesome cover-up. Ahmed returned to the property not long after, but this time the flat no longer held the living woman he had once controlled. Instead, Rania's lifeless body was carefully placed into a suitcase. It was a method chosen not just for concealment, but also for ease of transport. With grim efficiency, the suitcase was moved to Mohaned's motorhome, a vehicle capable of transporting a body discreetly out of the city. From there, the motorhome left Greater Manchester behind. It traveled north, eventually reaching a lay-by along the A19 near Thirsk in North Yorkshire, though the exact burial spot remained a mystery for over a decade. But Ahmed didn't stop at disposing of the body. With Rania physically gone, he turned his attention to erasing her digitally. He accessed her phone, logged into her social media accounts, and began sending carefully worded messages to her friends and family. The narrative he pushed was simple but devastating. Rania had left the UK voluntarily, moved to Turkey, and wanted to start a new life free of all ties. He even claimed she was remarrying. The messages were crafted to sound like her voice, mimicking her tone and phrasing. For those who knew her well, something may have felt off, but there was nothing definitive to raise immediate suspicion. This wasn't a one-off deception. Ahmed kept the charade going for days, even weeks. He timed messages to coincide with moments when concern might have peaked. He continued impersonating her, monitoring reactions and adjusting his lies as needed. His brother Mohaned also played a key role in the ruse, handing off Rania's mobile phone to a friend who was traveling to Turkey. That friend was instructed to send a message to Rania's father, reinforcing the illusion that she had indeed relocated abroad. It was a calculated move designed to add credibility to the story, suggesting phone activity and location consistency with the narrative Ahmed had fabricated. In the early days, the deception seemed to work. Some family members and acquaintances were initially reassured, but slowly, inconsistencies began to surface. Rania had appointments she never missed. Her solicitor couldn't reach her. Her support worker noticed the silence, and, perhaps most tellingly, her digital footprints, no matter how carefully manipulated, couldn't disguise the fact that they were all originating from the same place, Manchester. As the days turned into weeks and there was no contact, no bank activity, and no confirmed sighting of Rania, those close to her grew increasingly concerned. She had left behind all her possessions, did not collect her children, and had not contacted any of her friends. The turning point came on the 2nd of July 2013, nearly a month after she was last seen. It was only then, following a phone call from Rania's uncle in Lebanon, that she was formally declared a missing person. This critical delay, nearly 4 weeks long, allowed the perpetrators to widen the gap between the event and the investigation. Evidence had been lost, trails had gone cold, and the opportunity to gather early forensic leads was already slipping away. Nevertheless, police began to dig deeper, and as they followed the inconsistencies, they began to unravel the truth. Rania had not disappeared voluntarily. She had not moved to Turkey, and her digital communications were nothing more than echoes crafted by the man she had escaped. On the 3rd of July 2013, detectives with Greater Manchester Police brought Ahmed Al-Khatib, the estranged husband of Rania Alayed, in for formal questioning. To the outside world, Ahmed appeared composed, collected even. He didn't arrive at the station in distress. His demeanor was flat, almost indifferent, marked by an emotional detachment that startled even seasoned investigators. When asked basic questions, like when he had last seen his wife, he responded with vague deflections. He told police he hadn't spoken to Rania in months. Perhaps she had left for Turkey, he suggested. Or maybe she had returned to Syria. He couldn't be sure. According to him, she had simply vanished of her own accord. There was no urgency in his voice, no visible concern for the mother of his 3 children. No appeals to find her. No questions about the investigation's progress. Just cold speculation, presented without sentiment. But the detectives had already started building a picture, and what they saw didn't match his account. They were in possession of passport control data, confirming that Rania had not left the United Kingdom. Border Force records showed no entry or exit. Her bank account activity had ceased entirely. Her mobile phone had gone silent. She had missed multiple appointments with her solicitor, as well as scheduled meetings with social services related to her custody case. This was deeply out of character for Rania, who had been meticulous and consistent in her efforts to rebuild a stable life for her children. And then there was the matter of the social media messages. In the days following her disappearance, several friends and family members received texts and Facebook messages from what appeared to be Rania's account. The messages stated she had left the UK to start a new life. One message even claimed she had gotten remarried. For a brief moment, these digital traces provided false comfort to some, suggesting she was safe, albeit far away. But technical analysis told another story. Forensic IT specialists traced the IP addresses linked to these messages. None of them originated from Turkey, none from Syria. All of them were logged from locations in and around Manchester, many from areas in close proximity to Ahmed's residence. Additionally, Rania's email login times and device history pointed to domestic access, not international travel. These weren't messages sent by a woman fleeing for freedom. They were the digital footprints of an impersonator. Someone desperately trying to maintain the illusion that Rania was alive and abroad. The deception was unraveling, and investigators believed they knew exactly who was behind it. The very next day, on the 4th of July 2013, Greater Manchester Police made their move. Ahmed Al-Khatib was arrested on suspicion of Rania's disappearance. By that point, detectives had begun treating the case as a potential homicide. Too many indicators pointed to foul play. Authorities also believed that Ahmed had not acted alone. The precision of the digital smokescreen, the logistics of body disposal they suspected had occurred, and the role of his siblings in providing misleading information, these were all under investigation. The case was now expanding, reaching beyond just one man's lie into the deliberate orchestration of a cover-up. Shortly after Ahmed al-Khatib's arrest in early July 2013, a development emerged that sent ripples through the investigation team, something they hadn't anticipated so soon. His younger brother, Mohammed al-Khatib, came forward on his own. Voluntarily contacting police, Mohammed agreed to speak under formal caution. During the interview, his demeanor was reportedly calm but conflicted. When pressed about Rania's disappearance, he did not attempt to fabricate a new alibi or cling to the illusion that she had left the country. Instead, he gave a quiet, chilling admission. Rania was dead. He admitted, point blank, that Rania Alaid had been killed and her body had been buried, deliberately and secretly, near a lay-by along the A19 in North Yorkshire. It was a stark and sobering shift in the investigation. Until that point, much of the case had been built on circumstantial behavior and digital manipulation. But now they had a direct confession and a location, albeit vague. Shortly thereafter, Ahmed al-Khatib was reinterrogated. When confronted with his brother's statement, Ahmed did not deny it. Instead, he corroborated the account, confirming that Rania's remains had indeed been transported from the flat in Salford and buried somewhere outside of Thirsk, a small market town off the A19. While neither brother could provide precise GPS coordinates or detailed maps, both of their statements consistently pointed to the same general corridor, a stretch of road characterized by thick hedgerows, occasional woodland, and sparsely used laybys that offered enough cover for a clandestine burial. With that dual confirmation, the police transitioned into a new, far more complex phase of the investigation. What had started as a missing person case and then escalated into a homicide inquiry was now evolving into one of the most logistically intensive land searches in the region's recent history. A multi-agency task force was immediately assembled. Greater Manchester Police partnered with North Yorkshire Police, who had jurisdiction over the suspected burial zone. Recognizing the vast and rural nature of the terrain, the operation expanded further. The Royal Engineers and Royal Air Force were brought in to assist with both terrain analysis and heavy ground excavation, using military-grade equipment and technology. These were not just symbolic additions. They played a critical role in helping investigators interpret aerial and subsurface imagery, identifying areas where the soil might have been recently disturbed or manipulated. Specialist teams were also deployed. These included cadaver detection dogs trained to pick up even the faintest human remains, forensic archaeologists with expertise in clandestine grave detection, and botanists who studied local vegetation for signs of unusual regrowth patterns, clues that might indicate where the soil had once been disrupted and recovered. The targeted zone stretched over 19 miles of the A19, encompassing multiple laybys and pull-off areas that were lightly trafficked and not monitored by CCTV at the time. The landscape itself was a challenge. Rolling hills, unmanaged brush, and areas of dense foliage provided natural concealment. Compounding the difficulty was the fact that months had passed since Rania's disappearance. Rain, shifting ground, and seasonal vegetation growth had all contributed to erasing surface evidence that might otherwise guide a manual search. The operation unfolded over the course of several weeks. Investigators worked in difficult conditions, through both heat waves and heavy rain, often digging by hand to avoid damaging any potential evidence. Every shovelful of earth was examined. Mobile phone data, vehicle tracking records, and witness testimony were all cross-referenced to narrow down likely sites. Yet, despite the scale of the effort, the early 2013 search yielded no remains, no body, no personal effects, not even fragments of clothing. Though disheartening, the search was not deemed a failure. It provided investigators with an understanding of the geography and strengthened the case for premeditated disposal. The mere existence of the operation, the resources committed, and the matching confessions from Ahmed and Mohanad formed part of the prosecution's argument that Rania's disappearance was no accident, but a calculated act intended to erase her permanently. Despite having 2 confessions and a general burial location, the search was officially called off in September 2013. The effort had been exhaustive, but it ended without the one thing investigators and her family hoped for: a body to bring home, a grave to mark, or any confirmation of where she had been laid to rest. The lack of physical remains posed a significant challenge to the case. In most homicide investigations, a body provides not just closure, but vital evidence. It offers forensic clues, confirms cause of death, and often connects a suspect more directly to the crime. Without it, prosecutors would need to build their case on behavior, digital evidence, witness accounts, and circumstantial facts. Still, detectives pressed forward. They believed they had more than enough. And now, with confessions from both Ahmed and Mohanad pointing to a shared burial site, investigators were able to construct a timeline, however incomplete. Rania Alayed had been lured to a flat under the pretense of a family discussion. She never came out. Her body, according to the men who were last with her, was placed in a suitcase loaded into Mohanad's motorhome and transported out of the city. What happened after that point remained buried. In March 2014, the courtroom at Manchester Crown Court became the stage for one of the most complex legal battles in recent British criminal history. At the center of it was Ahmed Al-Khatib, standing trial for the unlawful demise of his estranged wife, Rania Alayed, a woman who had vanished without a trace nearly a year earlier. The trial unfolded without the most critical piece of evidence: a body. Yet the prosecution maintained that what they did have, a consistent timeline, confessions, digital forensics, and behavioral evidence, painted a clear picture of premeditated elimination. The prosecution focused on the weight of confessional evidence. Both Ahmed and his brother Mohanad had admitted that Rania had died and was buried near Thirsk. Their accounts, though lacking precise coordinates, were consistent in location and timeline. The defense, for its part, leaned heavily on the absence of forensic proof. They challenged the reliability of the confessions, noting that no body had been recovered despite a large-scale search. They argued that without physical confirmation, the court could not be certain of what had happened. After weeks of testimony, the jury returned its verdict in April 2014. Despite the absence of physical remains, prosecutors presented a compelling theory. Rania had been killed in a so-called honor-based act, driven by her husband's deep possessiveness and refusal to accept her independence. They told the court this was not a spontaneous crime. It was a calculated response to Rania's decision to leave a controlling marriage, rebuild her life, and seek custody of her children. Ahmed Al-Khatib was found guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 20 years before parole eligibility. His brothers were also held accountable. Majid Al-Khatib received 4 years for helping cover up the act. Mohanad, who had given a partial confession to authorities early on, was sentenced to 3 years. The conviction marked a rare legal outcome, one where justice was secured without a body, relying instead on digital footprints, motive, corroborated statements, and circumstantial proof. It demonstrated that a victim's voice could still be heard, even in silence. But for Rania's family, the courtroom victory came with unresolved grief. Without a body, there was no closure, no final rites, no resting place. Her children were left with answers that raised more questions about why, where, and how. And for the investigators, one piece of the puzzle still eluded them. Where was Rania? That question would remain unanswered, at least for a time. Rania Alayed's case was not the only tragedy to unfold under the watch of Greater Manchester Police, GMP. That year, she was one of 3 women known to have reported domestic abuse, who were later killed by their partners. Each case involved clear signs of escalating risk, yet the systems meant to protect them had failed to respond. Rania had done what so many women are encouraged to do. She had left her abuser, taken refuge in a shelter, enrolled in English classes, sought legal assistance, and was building a future free from fear. But she had also disclosed ongoing threats from her estranged husband, Ahmed al-Khatib, and despite those warnings, protection never came. The failures in her case triggered a lengthy investigation by the Independent Police Complaints Commission, IPCC. It would take more than 4 years to complete, but when the report was finally published, the findings were impossible to ignore. The IPCC described very serious concerns and identified recurring systems issues in GMP's handling of domestic violence. In Rania's case, they noted that risk assessments were poorly conducted, communication was fragmented, and frontline officers missed or misunderstood key warning signs. What should have been seen as a high-risk situation had not been treated as such. Several GMP personnel involved in managing Rania's case were subjected to internal review. The IPCC ultimately found their performance to be either poor or unsatisfactory. Still, none were disciplined for misconduct. There were no suspensions, no terminations, no formal accountability. To many, this outcome was as troubling as the crime itself. It raised questions about how seriously domestic abuse is treated by law enforcement, and what structural changes, if any, would be made to prevent future failures. For Rania's advocates and loved ones, it was another wound, knowing that she had asked for help and was left alone in the face of real danger. Though her husband was convicted in 2014, and 2 of his brothers received prison sentences for their roles in concealing her death, one question, where was her body buried, continued to echo through the years. Then, more than a decade later, a new chapter began. In February 2025, a quiet yet determined effort unfolded on a remote stretch of the A19 near Thirsk, North Yorkshire, an area that had long been at the center of a tragic mystery. North Yorkshire Police, acting on newly reviewed intelligence and refined forensic mapping techniques, initiated a targeted excavation at a lay-by that had been previously searched multiple times without success. It was a location repeatedly named in the chilling confessions of Ahmed al-Khatib and his brother Mohammed, the place where they had claimed Rania Alayed's body had been buried. But this time was different. This time, the search was not broad or speculative. It was methodical, data-driven, and guided by fresh information that had come directly from Rania's eldest son, Yazan Khatib. Now an adult, Yazan had spent years struggling with questions no child should have to carry. At age 18, he had confronted his father in prison and asked for the truth. Ahmed had circled a spot on a map, an area just off the A19, where he claimed his wife Rania had been laid to rest nearly 12 years earlier. Yazan, determined to end the silence surrounding his mother's fate, relayed this information to Greater Manchester Police. In late 2024, following additional interviews and cross-verification, Ahmed was taken out of prison under supervision and shown the area again. This time, investigators believed he was telling the truth. His directions were precise. The urgency and sincerity in Yazan's voice compelled police to authorize a renewed search in coordination with North Yorkshire teams. By early February 2025, the operation was underway. Specialist teams assembled, among them forensic archaeologists, cadaver recovery experts, geophysicists, and botanists. They brought with them ground-penetrating radar, soil analysis tools, and canine units trained to detect human remains. This was one of the most advanced forensic digs ever conducted in the region, carried out with meticulous care. The soil was examined for unnatural compression patterns. Roots and surrounding vegetation were studied for signs of previous disturbance. Every inch was scanned, every anomaly probed, and then within days, a discovery was made. Human remains were unearthed, fragile, time-worn, but unmistakably present. Investigators quickly announced that they believed the remains almost certainly belonged to Rania Alayed. While formal DNA testing and forensic confirmation were still pending at the time of reporting, the evidence, both circumstantial and spatial, left little room for doubt. The remains were found exactly where Ahmed had said they would be. It was a moment long awaited, yet nearly impossible to process. For law enforcement, the discovery was the culmination of years of relentless effort. For Rania's family, especially her children, it marked the end of a long, agonizing chapter of not knowing. It meant closure after over a decade of speculation, false hopes, and dead ends. It meant no longer having to wonder whether she might one day be found, or whether the truth of what happened to her would remain buried forever. And for Rania herself, though she could not speak, it meant something profound, a chance at dignity. Her loved ones would finally have a place to mourn. Her children, now grown, could lay flowers at a grave instead of imagining one. They could perform the Islamic rites she was denied in life, offer prayers at a known resting place, and remember her not through court documents or archived interviews, but through quiet moments of reflection at a site that now holds her truth. The discovery also reawakened public conversation about the broader meaning of her case. Rania Alayed had not simply been the victim of domestic violence. Her murder was ruled an honor killing, an act rooted in patriarchal control, cultural rigidity, and obsessive possession. Her death revealed the terrifying reality of how coercive control, systemic neglect, and cultural silence can merge into fatal consequences. Rania reported abuse. She obtained a non-molestation order, yet no effective protection was granted. The same system that advised her to leave also failed to shield her once she did. Her story continues to echo across the UK, reminding all who hear it that justice is not only about punishment, it is about remembrance. And after 12 years of uncertainty, Rania Alayed may finally rest, not as a statistic, not as a case file, but as a woman, a mother, and a soul finally laid to peace. If Rania's story moved you, let it not end here. Share her name, talk about coercive control, speak out against honor-based violence, and support organizations working to protect women and children fleeing abuse. Because for every Rania, there are others still waiting to be heard, and still fighting to be free. Don't let their silence be their legacy. Let it be a call for change. Subscribe to this channel for more real stories that deserve to be heard. Leave a comment to honor Rania's memory, or to raise awareness about someone you know. Like and share this video to help others learn what justice, silence, and courage really mean. Because for every Rania, there are others still waiting to be heard, and still fighting to be free. Don't let their silence be their legacy. Let it be a call for change.